Um, just wanted to let everybody know that this afternoon session, they are intended to be a networking session where we will ask all of you to talk and interact. So whether that's through the chat or through unmuting, whatever you're most comfortable with, but we want to definitely have conversation happening. So welcome everyone. My name is Christy Klinger. I work at Penn State University at the Institute for the Study of Adult Literacy with the Workforce Development System Liaison Project. And I've been in adult ed for quite some time. I started in the 90s as a volunteer tutor, spent time as a teacher, program director, worked in K-12 a little bit. And more recently, this past year, I've been mostly working with student support coordinators. And so thank you to those that were with me this morning for our Wakelet Workathon and decided to come back and learn about exploring technology skills that are needed for successful transition to different industries. So if you could take a moment in the chat and put in what you might already know about this topic. So you see this topic, this title on the screen. What do you think you might already know about this? And as we're doing that, I'll just move on to the next slide and share a little bit about what today is going to look like. So we're together for about an hour. And first, we're going to explore some technology skills that our adult participants need in order to successfully transition specifically to healthcare, transportation, and manufacturing industries. And the reason I've focused on these three industries is most local workforce development areas in Pennsylvania have these industries listed in their local plans. And so for those of you that might not be real familiar, each local workforce development area has a local plan and they've all been recently updated. And the local plan's good for a few years. And in that local plan, they are asked to identify some target industry or sectors that they will, try to help people get into and work with those employers to fill the needs. And usually they also then look at high priority occupations within those industries. So some of your local areas may have other ones, but almost all of them have at least one of these in there. The second thing we're going to do is have open discussion about how we might help learners assess their technology skills, identify and address the gaps that exist, and develop a plan for how they will improve their skills to be able to transition to the workforce in their industry of choice. And finally, we'll look at tools and resources that support effective career planning and transitioning. All right. So hopefully you're all able to see the chat. I see people putting in some great ideas. And then thank you, Bethany posted that we will put recordings up. It might take a day or two till we get them up there. So for those of you that have been in adult ed for a little while and you've been in Pennsylvania for some time, you probably have heard of this thing we have called the Foundation Skills Framework. And the Foundation Skills Framework is a wheel. And part of the wheel has skills that people typically need to get into the workforce. And then another part of the wheel are skills that people need to stay in the workforce. And then finally, there's skills that really people would need to be able to progress along the career pathway. And then in the middle of that wheel, lifelong learning holds all that together. So if we look at the Foundation Skills Framework, there is a uses technology list. So uses technology is considered the skill. And then each of these items uses common workplace technologies, demonstrates basic computer skills, and so forth, are the competencies. And then there's little check boxes that they can look at these observable behaviors that go along with that. So this is a starting place. You can look at this checklist with learners and say, okay, just in general, this is what you might need to be getting into the workforce, okay? But I'm curious for those of you that are familiar with the Foundation Skills Framework, what other skills apply to technology? So I'll throw out there, for example, solves problems. This morning already we were doing a session, I was using Wakelet, And one of the links I was sharing wasn't working. And so we had to problem solve right then and there. You know, that happens quite often with technology, that we run into problems. So I'll switch over to the Foundation Skills Framework wheel on the web and ask you to kind of look at that wheel and see what other skills you think might need to be used along with technology skills. You could put that in the chat or unmute. Yeah, so Sonia definitely locates and uses resources. And I think we saw this really clearly during COVID, where we were saying, okay, we're going to switch to virtual and we're going to use technology, but it's like, where are they going to get the technology? Where are they going to get the access to the internet? And, you know, then we also saw that some areas didn't even have access to high-speed broadband internet. And, you know, how are we going to serve them and get them ready? So that's definitely one. I think there was another one. Yeah, write clearly and read with understanding. I mean, especially when you are used to reading things on paper, there's a little bit of a difference to reading things on a screen and navigating on a screen to read. You know, we've been used to teaching people that, you know, you look at the book and you look at the titles and you look at this, but now, you know, when we're trying to help people prepare for the workplace, they might go onto a website like, okay, there's going to be drop down menus and there's going to be boxes you have to click. And like, if you're going to apply for this job, then you need to do this, this, and that. And you need to make sure you submit it. There's a submit button, which is kind of like handing it in, you know, to the employer. And, you know, another one, let's see, there's some more coming in the chat. Yeah, makes decisions. And especially the communication piece, that in the workplace, people might have to communicate via email. They may have to communicate through text, or they may have, like, I think of even at retail stores like Home Depot and Walmart, like they have little walkie-talkies and they have to know like how to press that and get it to the particular person or to go to a particular group. And so that all involves using technology, but also being able to combine other foundation skills. Another one that I think comes into play that sometimes people don't think about is applying health and safety concepts. You know, how do we use technology in a safe way in the work environment? So it might not be appropriate to be like taking videos at work and like, you know, maybe there's people around that don't want to be part of that video and you know, you might have to ask permission. And so those are things that they may need to think about when you're in the workplace. And definitely, you know, what kind of language is appropriate, you know, via email and, you know, not typing in all caps and things like that. So go back to the PowerPoint. And although the title talks about technology, and I use the term uses technology partly because when we're talking about workforce, ONET, which is what some of us use to figure out like what some skills might be that people need, uses the term technology skills. But we're starting to hear more in education and even in our local workforce development areas that, you know, we're lacking digital literacy. People have digital literacy needs. And we've even had Pennsylvania's Department of Labor come out with digital literacy grants to help local areas support people with their digital literacy. So the definition for digital literacy that I have comes from the American Library Association and really talks about the ability to use information and communication technologies to find, evaluate, create, and communicate information, which requires both cognitive and technical skills. So just like all of you were putting in all those different foundation skills, I mean, digital literacy is using all these different skills with technology. And Going further, there's all these other terms that come about. So just last week, I had the opportunity to attend the Equity Summit that was put on by OCTE, the Office of Career and Technical Education, and attended a session where they were talking about all these different terms and definitions and what do they mean. So digital equity, digital fluency, digital skills, digital resilience, media literacy. So, these are all these different terms that we need to think about as we help adults prepare to go into the workforce, and which ones are most important for the type of career and the type of career pathway that they're looking to pursue. So first, we're going to talk about the healthcare industry, and this is where we'd love for people to type in the chat and unmute, like as we talk about some of these statistics and some of these materials, like what's surprising to you? What did you already know? Do you think your area is worse or better than these statistics? So for the healthcare industry, and again, all of this stuff is cited from different research, and it's all in the references, and the PowerPoint will be shared on the PA Adult Ed Resources website. So you don't need to take these notes down. And if you want to read more into some of these reports, you can. But only 27% of US health and social workers have the advanced skills necessary to be most adaptable to changing technology. So when we think about individuals, yes, maybe they got into the healthcare industry, they got that job, but do they have the skills needed to stay in that job as things change, or to progress into other careers and occupations within that sector? And so we're saying really only about a little over a quarter of people working in that field can do that. Pennsylvania will be second only to Texas in experiencing the nation's most significant shortages in LPNs by 2030. So again, type in the chat, make a comment. How many of you have individuals that are possibly interested in LPN? How many of you have individuals who have talked about going to nursing in some capacity? How many of you have seen job postings in your area asking for LPNs, are already saying that there's shortages? And then if we look at ONET online and we go and look up licensed practical nurses, LPNs, it lists 13 different technology skills. So I want everyone to just, again, in the chat or unmute, what do you think one of those 13 skills might be that an LPN needs? I can tell you, we're going to look at it, and one of them was really surprising to me. You see, Tiffany said entering patient charting information. So that might be on a tablet, might be on a laptop. So they might have to, again, have that adaptability to enter it on different types of devices. Sometimes if you're typing on a tablet, that might be like where you have to find and pull up the digital screen and type it in versus an actual laptop with a keyboard. See that interpreting data. Yeah, Tina, that's a great point. And that's why it's so important for all of us to work within our workforce development system and constantly all be talking, because all of your PA career links in some way have a business service team that should be talking with employers. And it's really important that they feed back to us what employers are saying. Like, are they just wanting to only hire people for certain positions that have everything they need? Are they willing to do some training? And that's important for us to know. Like, if we think we can just give certain skills and get them in, and then will employers pick up from there, or it's like they get certain skills, they get in and they're stuck there because no one's supporting them. And then once they start working, they're not really coming to adult ed classes anymore either to get the support. So hopefully you can see this okay. This is a screenshot from ONET online for the LPM. And these are the 13 skills. So scheduling software, possibly coding. Well, the one that was really interesting to me was video creation and editing software. Like, that's not one I would have thought of that an LPN might need to have. So that one was a little interesting to me. Notice it names some of the common medical software, and then it gives the option to look at other things, but every healthcare facility is probably different. So, obviously we're not going to work with adults specifically on those medical softwares. But it would be interesting if employers are using some of those in our local area, if they could tell us some basic skills that people need to learn, be able to learn those types of things well. I think there was a question in the chat. So Donna asked, how do we bridge this gap? So I'm going to open it up. I'll pause for a moment, see if any of you have ideas. Like, we see that there's this need in healthcare. We see that people are going to need to advance, even if they start as CNAs, there's going to be this LPN shortage. There's going to maybe be these opportunities to move up into other careers. So how do we support adult learners now to get these skills that they need? Yeah, so Sue, I think you bring up a really great point. I'll say myself, like when I would be working with learners, when it was face-to-face, I mean, there was many times they came in and the technology was already hooked up, right? And so they just sat down at a laptop or a computer and they were doing the software stuff. I was making sure they could open Word, or I was making sure that they could put the flash drive in, which is still hardware, and then opening it up on the software. But like, if somebody would have bumped a cord and it came unplugged or the battery wasn't charged, like I didn't in the past spend time doing that kind of stuff and problem solving with people. And maybe that's something that does help us bridge the gap. I mean, maybe we need to purposefully put problems into the everyday thing, like make the internet go out for a moment, and like what ways do people figure that out? Because in the workforce, they're really going to need to do problem solving, and you're right, it's not always going to be around software. And like, when do you try to fix things yourself, and when do you go to your tech person? Like, I know when I have a technology issue, I always do a bunch of stuff, and then we have this whole ticket we have to put in online, and I always make sure I tell the tech person I tried all this, and the one thing I always do is I shut it down and restart it, because a lot of times that fixes some of the problems. I see lots of things coming in the chat. Hopefully all of you can see the chat and able to see what some of your peers are commenting on. So now we'll switch gears a little bit and talk about the transportation industry. So in the transportation industry, here, like, think about, this is also overlapping with construction, transportation in general, just moving of goods, storage workers. And so more than 1 in 10 US workers are employed in one of these sectors, okay, 1 in 10. And among the US workers at the proficient digital level, so these are people that are already saying, okay, they're proficient. Those people are between the ages of 16 and 44. Does that surprise you or not? I mean, when you think about the learners that come into your adult education classrooms, what age are the ones that usually know how to do more of the digital, deal with the software, the hardware, the troubleshooting? Probably majority of them are between those ages, because they're considered in some spaces digital natives. Some of those people in that age have never known life without technology. So yeah, so it wasn't that data wasn't surprising to me. However, what was interesting to me about this data was that there are slightly more women in this category than men. So that at times they're finding that women are more proficient with digital things than men are. And so again, looking at the breakdown, we have about 30% of people in the working within transportation that are proficient, but then a small percentage that are advanced. So the question is, if they're proficient, again, do they have that ability to be resilient And as things change, can they adapt and can they stay in that industry? So I will say that my brother is a truck driver. He does over the road truck driving. And I know he's had to use a lot of different technical tools that I didn't even realize he might have to. And so it's kind of funny because at times he'll call me and say, hey, I got to do this. Can you help me out? So he has somebody to go to. He has to keep advancing, but he's got, me to reach out to and help. But maybe there's other people within these industries that don't have that support. So another thing to think about is, not just the basic, like, oh, he might have a tablet in his truck, or he might have a computer that's, connecting and sharing the GPS. But they're starting to go so far as to have wearable technology and smart helmets and measurements and videos, deploying drones to survey building sites. So you actually have people in this industry that have to fly and use drones. And, a lot of the reasons we see the technology growing so rapidly in this particular industry is for safety reasons, because we definitely want to reduce the safety problems that can occur in this industry. And one of the other really neat tools is virtual reality for training. And I really encourage you, again, when you get a copy of this PowerPoint slide, to come back and take some time to link on here to watch some videos of how people can do training in the transportation industry through virtual reality. And there's not a lot of tech skills that people need to go and be able to do virtual reality training. So that's one good thing for us to know in adult ed, that if their next step might involve some virtual reality training, it's more they have to just be willing to try something new and be open-minded to doing it, versus they need specific technology skills to be able to participate. So virtual reality, they're usually putting on some kind of glasses or goggles, holding something in their hands, and then they're seeing a whole different environment and moving around and feeling like they're in that environment. So going along with resilience, there was this great article of a bus driver in Pennsylvania. So her name is Linda, out in the Lehigh Valley. She worked at BASD, as the Bethel Mary School District. And again, the link to the entire article is in the resources, the references section of this PowerPoint. But she went to the employment office and was introduced to all these different job opportunities. And at the age of 21, she decided she was going to be a school bus driver. She's now been a school bus driver for over 40 years. So she's in her 60s and still driving school bus. So you can imagine in 40 years time how much technology has changed the school bus. So she talked about back using paper maps, and now it's pretty much just telling them where to go. And she feels that the technology really improved the school bus ride. But one of the things she noted, in her interview, was that she was willing to adapt. She was resilient. She kept learning it, and she was having that growth mindset of accepting the new technology and that it could make things better. And she said, currently her school district doesn't have tablets on the buses, but she'd be interested in that technology. And I had a chance to help with the IET Design Camp nationally. And one of the training providers that was helping people with CDL training, they were talking about buses where as soon as the student walked into the school or got up into the school bus, they would be able to tap on the tablet or scan something, they might have a card or something that scans the tablet. And so they would have a digital record of every person that was on that bus. I mean, we've also talked about video cameras on buses and the safety pieces of that. So before we jump to another industry, any comments or questions about the technology that we talked about in this industry? Anything that's surprising, anything that you could foresee changing in the next 10 years or even 10 weeks? And I think we can tell learners things, but when they see like a real person sharing their story and have concrete examples, I think it's much more meaningful. So, if you do have learners that are interested in the transportation industry, I think, maybe reading this article about Linda, or, finding a YouTube video that has somebody talking about their career and the way that they've had to adapt and adjust is really helpful for learners to understand, again, what do I need to get into here? Where do I get support moving forward? And, some people might be a little scared, like that computers are going to take their jobs away. But if you have that resiliency, then you're able to keep adapting and taking the new jobs. So, you think about ATMs, they're automated teller machines. We still have people working at banks. It hasn't gone to all robots and technology, but those people have had to build new skills and be able to do other things to stay employed. So I remember, a few years ago, I was talking to people and they were looking at CDL drives. I said, well, do you think the trucks would get completely automated, that we wouldn't need drivers anymore? A lot of them didn't think that was the case, but I think it's important to, consider that maybe they would get automated, that vehicles would get automated, and maybe you would need to be able to transfer into some other aspect of the transportation industry. So we're constantly needing to, again, go back to the foundation skills framework. The thing that holds everything together is lifelong learning. So they're coming to us as adult learners to pick up some skills to get on to the next step. But hopefully we're encouraging them to be lifelong learners and continue to progress with their skills well beyond the time they're with us. Yeah, Donna and Maureen, definitely check out some of the stuff they're doing with virtual reality. It's really amazing. And the YouTube videos, or if you know anybody that has an Oculus and you can try it out yourself, it's really neat to see that. So let's switch over to the manufacturing industry. In this industry, we have, again, Pennsylvania having quite a bit of advanced manufacturing. So when we talk about manufacturing, some people, what comes to mind is that this is like dirty, hands-on work, and it's really tough. But, a lot of manufacturing that exists in Pennsylvania is humans and robots, or humans and machines, or humans and technology working together. So about 7% of the total jobs in Pennsylvania are in this industry. And the average annual wage for the manufacturing industry are around $57,000. And that was from 2019. So, we're seeing quite a bit of occupation starting to see an increase in salary. So I would bet that now that we're in 2022, that's even higher. And about 61% of these advanced manufacturing jobs require less than 1 year of on-the-job training to enter employment. But again, that's just to enter it. That's not necessarily, what else do you need to stay in there, and again, to be adaptable to the changes that occur within that industry. And yeah, Dawn, you bring up a great point, retention bonuses. And we've even see apprenticeship too. So like with that, some people are getting in with that, entry level, and it's built in that they're going to get so much training, they're going to get a mentor, they're going to have wage increases. So that happens throughout, the time that they're in that apprenticeship. Now, here we hear the word augmented reality. So as we said with the transportation industry, they were doing some virtual reality with their safety training. Augmented reality is where you might, again, wear glasses, but virtual objects are going to be along with your physical environment. So augmented is combining virtual with the real environment. So for those of you that have kids, in the last few years, you might have been familiar with Pokemon Go, where you're on your smartphone and little Pokemon characters appear in the middle of the park. That's augmented reality. The park scene didn't change, but you had this little virtual creature that popped up there. So for manufacturing, what they're able to do in augmented reality is assemble aircraft parts, interact with sophisticated robotic devices, and then even wear, again, like the glasses or goggles to receive in the moment training through virtual reality. So again, you can go from augmented to virtual. So I mean, they might be seeing some virtual objects in their actual thing where they are, and then they might switch over to where it's fully virtual and the whole environment is new. Nancy. So Nancy, which do you want to have in your field? Do you want to have the augmented reality of the Pokemon Go, or you want to have virtual reality? Or you just want to, or did you want those wages for our field? Okay. Yeah, the salary and retention bonuses. Yeah. Well, I will just, do a plug that right now our state legislators are working through the budget that the governor proposed. So we need to keep pushing for an increase in adult basic education so that we can, have a field where people stay and work, and we can work through a career pathway in adult education. Any other thoughts or comments on some of this information about manufacturing? All right, so looking at digital skills, I had picked out, a few types of occupations in this industry. So automotive service technicians, these are people that would be working on your car, inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, weighers. These could be people, working in a place that makes candy. It could be people that work in a place that could be pharmaceutical manufacturing and having to sort out pills and test kits and stuff. So that can, be in all types of different ways that manufacturing comes into play. Maintenance and repair workers, sales representatives, machinists, computer controlled machine tool operators. So you may have heard of CNC. So again, this is where humans and technology are working together every day. And then welders, cutters, solders, and brazers. So like one of the virtual reality trainings that I got to be able to dig a little deeper in and see was welders. They were starting individuals on virtual reality, and they gave them a weighted digital pen, which was replicating the actual welding device they would eventually start using. And then they put the goggles on and they had to weld two pieces of metal together. And they actually had to like apply so much pressure on the virtual pen. And if they started doing something wrong, it would like flash red on within the environment, within the goggles. So they could practice that virtually and not end up like burning themselves or starting something on fire or breaking stuff. And so as they were able to show that they could do pretty good welding between those two pieces of metal virtually, then they would move them on to start using the real equipment. But it was also a way for people to explore if that's something they wanted to do. And so even virtual reality can be used for career exploration. And what was really cool about this technology is, so if that person went to do welding that time, the next person maybe is going for healthcare, they put on the same, goggles, and they get this like digital pen, and now they're going in and like, maybe moving around different parts of human anatomy. So the technology just allows you to not need as large of a space to do training. You don't need as many materials, and, can kind of be on demand in some ways too. So the PowerPoint hyperlinks to ONET, and we'll go over there in a moment, and just kind of look around, like how do you help learners look at some of these digital skills like we saw with the nursing, to figure out what they might need to be practicing. So we'll go to some discussion now about some of the things we were talking about. In a moment, I'll switch over and look at the top 50 detailed work activities in Pennsylvania and how many of them might be related to digital skills. We'll talk about what plan you have in place to help adults identify and address skill gaps. And if there is no plan in place at your agency, how might you be able to get that going? And who at your agency and within your community and partners is involved in the process to help adults improve their digital skills? Is it just the teachers? Do you have somebody actually now designated as a digital navigator in your local area? And then what other questions you might have. So Let me switch over to the 50 top skills, and I will also put this link in the chat if you would like to view it there as well. Okay, could someone just verify that my screen now shows a list of skills?
It does, Chrissy.
Thank you. Okay, so again, I mean, it's a pretty long list, so it's not going to be that easy to see on my screen, but hopefully you can click in the chat and be able to get to it directly. But just looking at some of these things, which ones do you think might require digital skills? And if they do, what might that look like? And again, you can unmute or type in the chat. Yeah, Amy, I think you bring up a great point. I mean, as I look down this list, I'm thinking, you know, things are changing so rapidly, especially since COVID. And it's like, you know, one of them that I was looking at was like greet customers, patrons, or visitors. I mean, I don't even see a person when I go to the doctor's office anymore. I have a screen that greets me and I have to, like, you know, click on it, or I call somebody, you know, on the phone and I'm greeted by a computer that eventually might get me to a person. And I could see eventually, like, even walking into Walmart and having some little robot that says hi to you, because I've seen in like Walmart and the grocery stores, they have this little robot that goes around and checks inventory. Have any of you ever seen this thing?
Yeah, I've seen that.
You know what it's called, Donna? Doesn't he have a name? Or
No, I don't. I thought when I saw it, wow, this is really strange.
Yeah.
That was my reaction to
It's
it.
Marty at Shine. Okay. So yeah. So like, I don't know if Marty ever greets people, but like it might get to that point. I don't know. And I also saw an article about virtual pets. Like it was picking up in China, and they were actually using these virtual animals like in nursing homes and in preschool classrooms to help people like emotionally. Like they were like emotional support pets, but they were virtual pets, and it was really cool to see some of the ways that they came about. But I'm thinking like I got out of college and starting in preschool, and at the time, you know, we were doing like hands-on things like playing with Play-Doh and paint, and now there's like all this technology. Like to imagine that a preschool teacher might need to know how to operate the digital classroom pet is, you know, kind of interesting. What about serving food or beverages? Do you think there is a technology skill that people need for that? Tiffany, yes, the Tamagotchi. Yeah, I think the fixing a drink machine. I think like even if you're in a restaurant, sometimes you're not like you take the drink order and put in a tablet, and then somebody else is like pouring it and you go somewhere and pick it up, or like you get or somebody else has to use like a buzzer to tell the waitress that the drink is ready and they have to come over and get it. So yeah, something that would seem that it used to be real simple. You just pour a cup of coffee. Now it's gotten quite complicated with technology, but it's meant to make things easier. But for those of us, again, who are maybe 50 or older, who haven't been digital natives, we haven't grown up with technology. We know a life before it. And sometimes I think we'd rather some things go back to not having that technology. Yeah, the beeper at restaurants. Yeah, and like Red Robin has a little kiosk at the tables and you can order refills on your drinks. So I mean, it goes somewhere to tell your server. So I mean, they have to check some kind of digital tablet or screen or something like that. So again, looking at ONET, if you want to help learners, figure out, oh, I want to go into this particular occupation. So I'll put food server on here. Food server isn't necessarily a high priority occupation and not necessarily going to be, something long-term career, but might be a starting point for some learners to get some basic work skills. So even that is, saying the POS, point of sale software, closing out the bill, and the other types of software that particular restaurant or food facility might be using. Anyone want to type in the chat or unmute a particular occupation you're curious about that and wondering what the technology skills might be for that? Oh, a dispatcher. Okay, let's see what that says. So when you use ONET, you can go up here and skip down to technology skills, or you can scroll here. It comes up pretty quickly, but you also need to look here because it's 5 of 21. So again, if you're helping learners explore this, make sure they go down and see all of that. So my goodness, yeah, dispatcher, just scheduling software, help desk and call center software. Yeah, a lot of software. And so, they have to have that resiliency to keep learning and adjusting when the next update comes out. Or, the other thing that, throws me for a loop sometimes, I don't know if anybody has an iPhone, but for the longest time, my iPhone on my Safari web browser, the name of the website and the URL was at the top of the screen. And then one day I did an update and suddenly it all changed how you look at the browser. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? And so I'm sure that happens with our learners at times where it looks a certain way and then there's a software update and it doesn't look the same and they think they broke it or they did something wrong, and it gets very confusing. But, this definitely seems like a career option and occupation where you would have to be willing to be very go with the flow and adaptable, because all of those different softwares could change and upgrade, and have to be able to go with the flow.
Hey, Chrissy.
Yes.
One that might be interesting to look at is, I'm trying to think of something that people would think, oh, technology wouldn't be a part of that occupation. But I know for many workforce development areas, agriculture and farming is still kind of a priority in their area. So it might be interesting to look at one of those for technology.
Yeah, so I just put farm worker in. So again, electronic mail software, internet, so saying office. I would think too, like it's not, let's see it on here. Depending, like you're saying, like what, like if they're in like milk production, or
Right.
certainly, I would think there's certain portals they might have to log in, or scheduling, that has to be done. So yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. For those of you that might have been at the Adult Ed Kickoff, I had an app that I shared. I have it on my phone where I can take a picture of plants outside, and it will tell me what that plant is, how to take care of it. So I could even see like farmers, all of a sudden you have something growing in between your crops and you're like, what is this thing that's growing here? Like you could have an app on your phone that takes a picture and tells you what that is. Is it invasive? Is it poisonous? Is it dangerous if your cows eat it, and stuff like that? So I remember prior to that app, I had this giant gardening book that I was trying to look up and figure out what plants I had in my yard. And this app has been a lifesaver. So what about plans you have in place to identify and address skill gaps? Anyone share what their agency is currently doing to help learners identify what gaps they might have in technology and for the types of occupations they're looking at?
Well, I don't know how much of it, how it'll be targeted, but we are, we're in Montgomery County, and we're going to be pairing up with the Montgomery County Community College Workforce Development Program to help our ESL students transition into the workforce. So I'm possibly thinking that involves computer skills and other skills as well, but we're waiting for that to happen. They're going to give us standards and identify how we can help the students move over to these kinds of jobs. Yeah, so it's exciting for us.
Yeah, someone put in the chat North Star class. So Amy, remind me, is your area where you had a digital literacy grant along with the library? Is that correct? Are you doing with them, or this is just something you're doing with your literacy council or your workforce
Well,
board?
Delaware County Literacy Council in Chester is one of the sites that's doing it. And the others are libraries. CareerLink is one, and I think the other three are all libraries. And there's one every day of the week, and ours is the one on Friday. So the idea is students choose one. So for example, if someone wants to do the class on Friday, then they'd come to our location. And it's the same teacher. The teacher travels around.
Mhm. Yeah, so for any of you that aren't aware of North Star, I mean, some Pennsylvania Career Links have paid for the full package of North Star, and like people can go to the Career Link or the libraries, like they might have done that with the digital literacy grants that were out to help people progress with their skills. And then there are some free ones. So even as an adult literacy provider, you could connect the learners to some of the free ones. So just put the link in the chat to North Star. The other thing, we did a lunchtime webinar on this. So there's a whole webinar that you could learn more about Skill Up PA. So if you go to the Friday lunchtime webinars and look up last month's for student support coordinators, Skill Up PA is through Metrics Learning. And as long as someone like opens up a PA Career Link account, which is free, they can get started and practice using Skill Up PA's online portal to learn some different skills. So there's like problem solving, critical thinking. They have a digital literacy course within Skill Up PA, but it's quite complicated. So, I mean, definitely North Star is more that starting point. Skill Up PA would be progressing or adding some other skills and practicing some digital skills. As far as, again, assessing, I'll share, I have, sometimes checklists can be helpful, and I like this one where I, ask the learners to mark off that they want to learn it, like they don't even know how to do it at all, or they want to do it better, or they already know this and could even show other people how to do it. And then I love this, I don't need to do this. So this is a great assessment to do with learners and see what they don't think they need to know how to do. And then when you're starting to do more career exploration with them and you go to some of the stuff on ONET, like some of you were saying, like, I didn't know you might need to use a computer if you were going to work on a farm, or I didn't know that there was, going to be tablets for a school bus driver. And so this checklist, goes down. And then there's another one down here related to workplace skills too, and the same kind of idea. So it's a Google Doc. I put the link in the chat. You can copy it and adjust it to meet your needs. So Crystal, did it show up? If somebody could click that Google Docs link and let me know if it worked. Thank you, Nancy, because I did have problems with links earlier. The Pennsylvania Career Guide, this will help them do some career explorations, not necessarily going to dig deep into what technology skills might be needed, but give them a sense of like what jobs are here in Pennsylvania and what those job openings look like. And then you could go back to ONET and do some further career exploration. So they do update that. They used to print them out, but now they're just in the PDF, so you have to print them yourself or save it as a PDF. The other place that you guys as adult education practitioners can go to get more support is Links. So the Links has several different communities, and I'm actually the moderator for the Career Pathways community. But if there's certain technologies you want to talk about, you can go into the integrating technology group, and as long as you're a Links member, you could post a discussion or respond to discussions. The correctional and reentry education group too has been talking about, different ways to build digital skills while people are incarcerated. Again, the Career Pathways, we have had many conversations, and we had a whole event on virtual reality. And even the Disabilities and Equitable Outcomes group, talking about how do we help individuals with disabilities be able to maybe use technology to help them with some of the things that they struggle with, or to adapt so they can use technology that's out there. So some really great conversations, and then English language acquisition and how different technologies can help our English language learners. So I'll put the link to Links in the chat as well. The other question was who is involved in the process to help your adults improve digital skills? So maybe we could take some time to put that in the chat, or unmute, how much of this is falling on the shoulders of your staff at your agency? How many of you are able to get some community partners? And like we already heard someone mention, that some of the career links are able to offer some of the support, some of the libraries. So, it doesn't all fall on us to do that. And while you guys are maybe thinking of some things and typing in the chat, one other thing I'll share, many of your career links offer workshops, and, many of them, like anybody can go to them. So I just pulled up Delaware County's career link one because I knew they had some different topics. So you'll see people can go in for these different workshops, but you might have a career link that offers a workshop related to digital skills. So, the resume essentials, maybe they're just talking about the essential information that needs to be in a resume, but maybe they're also helping them, create the resume and do that on an electronic device. And even going back to the uses technology list, think about taking this list and maybe changing these columns and putting teacher, student support coordinator, partner, student has to learn it on their own. Which of these things could be integrated into everyday instruction? Which of these could maybe the student support coordinator practice with the learner while they're meeting with them? Which of these are something that your partners are already doing, or they might be better suited to do and they have better resources to do it? And then which of these are things where adults are just going to have to go learn it on their own? You're gonna have to say, hey, you're gonna need to go to a YouTube video or find a friend, to show you how to do this, because we're not going to spend time on it and we don't have somebody that can commit the time to it. Yeah, Crystal, you bring up a great point. Just because people are digital natives, we have to be careful with our own bias, that we don't assume because somebody that's 18 that just enrolled in our program who dropped out of school recently really knows how to use technology. I know for one, I have a 21 and an 18-year-old, and they're great at using technology to play video games, but some technology skills that they need to be successful in the workforce, they're still lacking. And so they definitely still need digital literacy in certain contexts and to be able to be effective in the types of occupations they're looking at. All right, we have just a few more minutes, so I just want to go back over to my PowerPoint and just close things up here today before we leave. So we talked about some different ways you might look at helping adults assess their digital literacy skills, North Star Skill Up. Also supplemental distance learning that a lot of you offer, some of those different programs that are out there. And then we talked about checklists. And then again, have links to these different things I was showing you on the internet. So before we leave today, if you guys could just put in the chat or unmute, what do you feel like you can take away from today? Is there a certain resource I shared that you want to check out? Is there something you might share with students? Is there something you're looking to try? And what do you still need to know? Like what questions do you still have? What support do you still need? And we can see how we can continue to do that through networking or through lunchtime webinars. So I'll give you guys a moment to give some feedback. And then on the screen, I have my email address and hope that you'll reach out to get more support with some of these things we talked about today. Because like I said, this is an hour session, so it was really short time to hit, but just trying to gloss over, some basics in these industries. All right, thank you. Great things coming in through the chat. Yeah, and I really, again, like going back to that checklist, yes, it's great for students, but I can't emphasize the importance of sitting down with staff and partners and looking at those different digital skills and saying like, who's doing this? Because we don't want to be duplicating services. And, some of these things, maybe this learners do need to practice with every partner. And we really need to be aware of like the resources that are in our community. And it's changing all the time too. Like, with all these different grants that are coming out, like maybe last month your library didn't have any support with digital literacy, and now they got a grant, and over the summer they're going to have a digital literacy open space, or you're starting to see like maker spaces pop up where people can come in and use 3D printers and try playing with drones and things like that. And again, maybe your community didn't have that 4 or 5 months ago, and now it's it's coming. So it's really important to keep checking in with your partners and see what they're able to help with and support. Yeah, so I don't know, as far as like grants and things to support with digital literacy, the Department of Labor and Industry did have 2 rounds of grants. They're closed now, but what happens is they don't usually give a whole lot of notice. So when they come out, they're pretty quick turnaround. So, you can always keep checking the Department of Labor and Industry website. Again, having really good partnerships with your Workforce Development Board, because sometimes when these types of grants come out, they want to do them regionally. So they'll more than less likely give it to places that are going to cover a pretty decent sized region or multiple counties. So again, working with your partners and constantly talking with each other so you can all be together to get some of those opportunities. All right, well, thank you guys and girls and everything in between. Any virtual pets that might have shown up while we were here today. I really appreciate you coming to the session. And like I said, we'll get the PowerPoint slides and the recording up on the website soon. And if you really, really need the PowerPoint, and can't wait, just email me and I can send it to you that way too. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.